We compiled a list full of negative experiences that autistic people face into a bingo sheet. And to see how commonly shared these experiences are, we asked our guests to play a game of Trauma Bingo.
Hey guys!
Hi!
Hi!
Okay, can you guys please introduce yourselves?
Hi! I'm Juliana Heng and I'm do stand-up comedy. Also, I'm on the autism spectrum.
I'm Beatrice and I'm a late diagnosed autistic female who is now doing a lot of activism work for autism.
Hi guys, my name is amirul. I'm soon to be 28 years old in May, and I'm a person with major depressive disorder and type 1 autism spectrum disorder.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm 30 this year. I'm a content creator and I'm on the spectrum.
So do you guys know what we're doing today?
We're playing bingo.
Yeah, we're playing bingos.
Do you guys have any expectations on how today will turn out?
I hope that we actually start to look at autism from the autistic narrative. There's a lot more to be understood.
Well, I'm expecting to learn more about myself, actually, and other people, of course, on the spectrum. Yeah.
Okay, so before we start, can we play a game of rock, paper, scissors to determine who goes first?
Okay.
Rock, paper, scissors, go! Okay, Beatrice will start.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll start with, have been told I'm not autistic enough. I'm sure you've heard this many times.
Yes.
But it came from various people, and surprisingly, these are people from the medical fraternity sometimes, because we have this belief that autism is severe and mild. We tend to think that it's very linear when actually it's not, because oftentimes when I meet people and they kind of think that you don't kind of fit into that criteria of being autistic, so you must be not autistic enough, so we don't know where to place you, so maybe you don't really have that trouble. You're not severe enough for us to pay attention to what you have to say. And then 3 weeks later, they'll find me on the floor crying in the middle or not answering calls for 3 to 4 weeks. And then it's like, okay, she's going through something. And then people start to see that it's more than being a mild autistic person.
They will say oh, you don't look autistic enough, but why is your behavior like that? Because they think that you need to have a certain look to actually pass off as being on the spectrum. And if you don't have that look, which I wonder what is the look of autism, then they will dismiss whatever you say. They just say you have attitude problem, but it's more than that. What is happening inside is a multiverse, It's it's so many things happening at the same time.
I really don't like when people say that you don't look like an autistic person, because an autistic person should be like a childlike or something like you see in the media, in film and television, when people depicting autistic people. So it's like, do I need to print out my diagnosis and then show to you? It's really condescending for us.
The media portrayal of people with autism is quite shit. And it's unfair because yes, fair enough, there are people who do require a lot of assistance in their life, but that's not the whole picture. And I don't appreciate how people put people on the spectrum in a box, because people on the spectrum are super diverse. There are people like myself, like Adika, who live normal lives, who have friends, who have relationships. We're normal people. We're just not neurotypical, that's all. Have had trouble reading people. Sometimes I don't know whether someone sounds sincere or not. To some people, it is easy. Even people on the spectrum, I think some people will be able to determine whether someone is just being truthful, being sincere, or just being conceited or lying to you. But for me, I take everything at face value. The first thought that goes into my head, okay, yeah, I gotta believe what they say.
I do stand-up comedy, so I'm expected to read the room. I have trouble reading people even in one-to-one conversations. It can be everyone can be doing well on stage that night because maybe they pick up certain cues from the audience. I didn't pick that cues because I didn't shift gear. I will just do what I already planned, and it will end up just flat. And then you'll feel oh my god, you're what am I missing here? Did I not get the memo on something? Even in real life, when people interact with me, people like to be vague. So for me, sometimes I don't know what they want. If let's say I were to pursue it wholeheartedly, I will get depression just figuring out what went wrong with that interaction.
I realized this when I did my assessment. There's this one part, it starts to show facial emotion against a blank background. And when I was going through that, I got 1 out of 40. I've never felt more like an idiot. And then I realized like, oh my god, that's why I'm so frustrated. Because I don't understand what people are saying.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I like filmmaking. Because you script what everybody says. Face looks like this.
One thing that I really struggle with till this day is sarcasm. I cannot tell when someone is being sarcastic. I will just always assume that they're being genuine. Even amongst friends who know I'm on the spectrum, they don't realize that sarcasm is extremely hard to see through.
I think it's harder to go via text and tweets as compared to real life.
Yes.
I agree on that because in social media you only see the words, the letters. When you type the letters, you didn't read the facial expression. Well, it's very hard for us to understand because we don't really grasp the context.
So I would also text my friend like, hey, this person said this. What did they actually mean?
Oh, I have to Google up. For me, I Google up.
Oh my god, I used to Google. Someone asked me this twice. What does it mean?
I have also Googled emojis people use. Like, I don't understand what emoji sometimes they use, so I'm like, what does all this emoji mean? Then I will type in the emoji and then they'll come up with interpretation. Okay, this means that, that means that. I was like, oh, okay.
People on the spectrum in a more straightforward and direct
Yeah.
I don't think it's just for autistic people. I think for
everyone
everybody.
it should be the same lah.
Yeah.
It's like, have been bullied. My bullied is not a I beat you up, those kind of bully. It's the isolation kind of bully. Since I was a kid, it's always the same. We started off like, nice to meet you, work for a while, and after a while, sometimes people will think that I'm like weird and all that. So it felt isolating, and I think people always think that, oh no, isolation is like not really bully, but I think it is, because loneliness is actually a kind of pain actually. It's only until I kind of like understand that I'm on the spectrum, then I don't feel like really sad or what when that happened.
I'm sorry if people do that. And to be fair, I sometimes do that to people too. Because we fear what we don't understand actually. And inherently that's us as humans. So if we are scared, then we push them away. But what I do relate most is, chronic loneliness. I would say that I'm super lucky that, regardless of all the dramas that I go through in life, I'm here today that I have friends, but that inability to find connection with people intuitively, it's very debilitating. If anyone ever say anything about autism, everyone across the spectrum, regardless of wherever you are, that difficulty of finding connection and make you lonely is the most painful thing about autism. It's not about I can't talk, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's
okay.
Yeah, I acknowledge that although I have a lot of friends in social media, a lot of followers, in reality, I can say that I am alone. I still feel the emptiness inside of me. And we admit that the people on the spectrum really have trust issue when we deal with friendship. Because the stigma is there, it's still there. Most people don't want to be our friend because they look us as a bad omen. When you friend with autistic people, I was like, kau kawan dengan dia. But then I can acknowledge that we, the people on the spectrum, really have difficulty in making friends or having a healthy friendship.
Like, I remember even when I was in uni, it's the same thing. I'm always the nerd lah. I'm always sitting in front of the teacher. But then usually, the places around me is usually empty. They rather sit somewhere else than to be near me. It comes to a point where I even want to numb myself, just like, never mind, these people, it's okay, I can be on my own. But then on the inside, I'm like, no, actually I need people, it's not true that I don't need people, yeah.
Have struggled to find a romantic partner.
I think there's also some form of a misconception as well that, wow, if you're autistic or in fact, if you're disabled in any form, you don't have a sex life, you don't have sexuality, you don't have a love life. And I find it really sad because over the last 1.5 years, the more I talk to people with various degrees of challenges, people who are also non-speaking as well, everyone tells me they're lonely and wish that they had a partner. You know, and here I am, sometimes I also always think that like, yeah, you know, B, you've got it so much better than a lot of other people. But I don't, I struggle, you know. I've been through a string of extremely problematic, chaotic and toxic relationship on my part, on their part.
Being in a relationship and fall in love is the hardest thing in my life as an actually autistic person. There are some challenges that we as actually autistic people face in a relationship, like spacing out in a conversation, struggling with social skills. For me, it's like maintaining eye contact, because when I talk to people, it's very hard to maintain eye contact. Sometimes I feel that there's a lack of emotional contact with my partner. Previously, I had a girlfriend. We separated in July 2019, right after I'm admitted to the psychiatric ward and right after I'm being diagnosed with MDD and type 1 ASD. As I try to work on my relationship, it's likely that my relationship with her is becoming limited, and that will cause further loneliness to myself.
My life is full. Really, I could sincerely say that, you know, but I want to be a mom. I can't, you know, I'm scared of like, you know, what happened to me. Now I'm crying also. Yeah, and I want to fall in love. Also, I really do, you know. But it's so hard that it's just not worth it anymore. And people forget that we want the same things. And we don't talk about this at all. Never, ever. That's me that can speak, you know. Imagine someone else.
I have felt like a burden to my parents. Before my diagnosis, I was always made to feel like I was a brat. I didn't want to do certain things that other people could do, or I couldn't do certain things despite trying so hard to. So people made me think that I was just incompetent, or I was just spoiled or something. At times, like, I had suicide ideations because I felt so useless. This was prior to my diagnosis, so I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought, you know, I can't face myself despite trying really hard to. Yeah, at one point you just reach like the lowest of the low because you think there's really no way out, despite how hard like you're trying. When I was in college, it was really hard for me to attend all classes. To me, like, I just hated being in a crowd of people because our auditoriums were huge. They fit like 500 people. You know, as someone on the spectrum, it can get a little overwhelming and hard to concentrate. But I did my homework, I did all my assignments, and I got really good grades too. But the school contacted my parents telling them, hey, your son is not attending classes. Can I get tissue? Yeah, just in case? Oh, I'm already crying. Shit. My dad, like, he got angry, of course, because, you know, he's paying for my school fees and everything. And when we talked about it, he was like, don't be so fucking useless. It really stuck with me. I mean, he did apologize for it later, and he's so much better now. But the words still stick. And they still hurt.
That sense, do you think that you getting diagnosed, like, you kind of helped your father understand that as well?
Yeah, definitely did. I think they treated me differently, but in a good way. They were more sensitive to certain things. Yeah.
I would say I wish people didn't treat us differently. Because at the end of the day, we are all human beings and all of us come in different shapes, sizes, condition and all. And why do people have to treat us differently just because we identify as certain identity or even like having certain survival of certain condition or what? Like for myself, when I do comedy, when I say that I have autism, that's when people start to feel sorry for me. Causal action is when they feel sorry for me, they won't be able to laugh. That is the last thing I want.
Be a person with disabilities in Malaysia is so challenging. Although people say like when you registered as a okay, you with JKM, you have the pink card, but then having that pink card is like a double-edged sword. Yes, you have some certain privileges, but then people will look you in a different manner, and for me, that's really concerning. Although we are neurodivergent, we also deserve treatment like other normal people as well.
Okay, guys. So how's that whole session for you guys?
Good. It was very enlightening.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it a lot.
I actually felt relief, like because there's a lot of things that I kind of unpack here, and also I find another person I can relate with.
Yeah, it really describes us a lot, particularly myself, because this is the kind of thing that we face every day. But yet, many people doesn't look through the lens.
It's always nice to hear more and more stories. So hopefully one day, you know, it's not so much a strange thing anymore. It's just like, oh,
Correct.
you have autism.
Yeah.
You know, it's and also when you normalize talking about autism, right, then people are more brave to come and tell you stories. And because like one of the most powerful things someone told me, and I cried when they told me, was like, I wrote a couple of articles last year. You know, someone printed it, brought to the doctor and said that like, please diagnose me.
Asking you, for those of us who are watching this video who are still trying to understand autism, what are the last words?
Be kind to everyone, regardless of who they are, because you never know who you're talking to, what they're struggling with.
Every autistic person is a person of their own. You will not find two alike. So if there's something that you're wary, you don't understand, or you're trying to understand more, go talk to an actual autistic person.
You're free to come to us and ask questions. Don't worry, we don't eat people. We are not harmful. Just be open and be honest with us. Don't worry.
That's all.
Yay!
Thank
Yay!
you so much.
No problem.